1. The apocalypse has a way of fouling up one's plans. To its credit, humanity has done its best to anticipate the end of days, but lacking any basis for a reliable timetable, they've jumped the gun on more than a few occasions. The apocalypse's stubborn refusal to arrive on schedule has caused no end of trouble for the people who have volunteered to announce its arrival. Those waiting at the metaphorical arrival gate for the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are forced to eat a lot of metaphorical crow and pay for a lot of metaphorical flooring. As you'll recall from some of the earlier reports produced by our organization, Saint Clement I was one of the first to predict an imminent apocalypse around 90 AD. He went around for several years telling the masses that the end was near. The masses responded by making him into a boat anchor. Once he was out of the way, they were free to replace their old linoleum. A Roman priest and theologian once used the dimensions of Noah's Ark to predict that Christ would return in 500 AD. When 500 ended with a whimper rather than a bang, he was forced to admit it was time to retile his foyer. Later, Christian scholars argued that Christ would wait for the odometer to flip before returning in glory. Never mind that they were using the wrong year for Christ's birth. If it were up to them, there would have been a massive run on flooring materials at the beginning of the second millennium. The great linoleum shortage of 1001 AD was forestalled only by the near-universal inability to read a calendar. Pope Innocent III was convinced that the apocalypse would arrive on the 666th anniversary of the birth of Islam. The Pope's regard for Muhammad notwithstanding, the mountain failed to arrive. He gave in and replaced the wood flooring in the Vatican with ceramic tile. In 1669, the old believers in Russia barely avoided an expensive flooring upgrade by immolating themselves. This was before the days of zero-interest financing. The Jehovah's Witnesses nearly single-handedly prompted the rationing of floor materials at various points in the late 19th and 20th centuries, with apocalypses scheduled for 1891, 1914, 1915, 1918, 1920, 1925, 1941, 1975, and 1994. After 2,000 years of this, most people had grown a little jaded regarding the prospect of an imminent Armageddon. Predictions of the end became so common by the dawn of the third millennium that homeowners no longer thought twice about installing new flooring weeks or even days before a scheduled apocalypse. So it was not for lack of warning that Christine Temetri, an otherwise intelligent young woman who had recently purchased a 900-square-foot condo in Glendale, California, made the astoundingly ill-advised decision to have new linoleum installed in her breakfast nook only days before the apocalypse was scheduled to start. Her decision was, if anything, the result of an overwhelming surfeit of warnings. The latest of these warnings came from one Reverend Jonas Bitters, first prophet of the Church of the Bridegroom. Jonas Bitters was a former recreational vehicle salesman who had, through a combination of spurious scriptural exegeses, excessive reliance on Google's automated Hebrew-to-English translation service and mathematical errors that could have been caught by a bright third grader, happened upon a date for the end of days that was within a hair of being accurate. When one considers that most eschatological timetables were off by decades, if not centuries or even millennia, Bitters was so close to the correct date that speculation has arisen in certain corners of heaven as to whether he was somehow guided in his feverish stacking of errors by the Almighty himself. Advocates of this theory point to the fact that if Bitters had not forgotten to carry the 1 in a certain equation, he would have been dead on. Skeptics point out that if he had correctly counted the number of letters in YHWH, he would have been off by another 80 years.